Alrighty, so tonight the topic is linguistic fuckery. And I use that phrase to basically to demonstrate how language is being used in all facets of our society, really beyond our society, but all over the world right now. It's a form of there's a rhetoric, uh, there's a method in this language that is being used to have people get to a state of mind where they accept totalitarianism. And not only is it manipulates in many ways. So we'll talk about how the language is used, what the characteristics of that language are, and how to recognize it, how it manipulates, why people are susceptible to it. Because there is a state of mind that makes people especially susceptible to this manipulation through language, and what you can do to not be susceptible to it, and how you can communicate with people such that you're not perpetuating it, and that so that you can also wake people up, from the comatose zombification that has occurred through their manipulation by language. Okay, so again, this I would say this conversation would center around critical theories, because that's the cudgel, that's the club being used by neomarxism, wokeness, to not, I don't know if prepare is the right word, but to have people accept this specific brand of totalitarianism. And so there's all kinds of phrases, right, that are flying around, and there's a method that's being utilized as well. Okay, so we've heard phrases like privilege and diversity and equity and inclusion and marginalized, right? So there's all these phrases, okay, that are just kind of are in our linguistic sphere of influence now, and it's in media, and it's in education at all levels, not just the universities anymore, but you're seeing it even in elementary school. And one of the methods, we'll start with a method that's used in language that is, again, intentionally designed to manipulate. So I have a neighbor, well, I have a couple neighbors, but one of my neighbors has a sign on their front lawn. I'm sure you guys have seen these signs. And it says, it says, love is love. Okay. Tautology. It's kind of obvious. I don't know. I don't even know what to say to that. It's the implication, right, that really is what's significant here. So it says love is love. It says science is real. It says people aren't illegal. It says what's one of the other phrases on there? Science is real. I forget. There's a couple other really good ones on there. I'm forgetting the sign right now. But what's the implication here? The implication is that, for one, they're advertising that they are woke, okay? That they have bought into an ideology. Oh, it says Black Lives Matter is one of them. But these are statements, right, that nobody disagrees with, right? At least no sane person disagrees with, right? Like, well, and I mean, I don't know whether you can agree or disagree with a tautology like love is love. But like, yeah, people aren't illegal, but people do illegal things, right? So the implication there is that, well, if you don't believe in my ideology, well, then you believe people are illegal, and you don't believe love is love, and you don't believe people are equal. And see, this is one of the methods that is used in language that like you'll see like an AOC, right? She'll go out and she'll say something like people should be treated fairly, people should be treated equally, and she's making obvious statements that nobody disagrees with, right? Like, yeah, we all think and believe and hold as a value that people should be treated fairly, that people should be treated equally. And then she'll go into her ideology and start regurgitating her ideology. And the implication is, if you don't agree with my ideology, my methods of approaching equality or addressing equality, right? Which she's really not talking about equality, because the word that really starts to come up is equity, right? And then inclusion and diversity. And these words from their ideology don't mean at all what you would think these words are supposed to mean, right?
Now, like, Brandon, let me ask you a question real quick. I just looked up the sign, and there's a couple of different versions, but there's one that says Black Lives Matter, no human is illegal, love is love, women's rights are human's rights, science is real, and water is life, and injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Now, it seems like to me those are like the principal points of an ideology. So any one of those is like an entry point to it.
Well, here's the point. None of those are the points of an ideology. See, what those are phrases that nobody disagrees with, right? I mean, yeah, water is life. Okay. But are there anti-water people all of a sudden? I don't even know those people. Who the fuck is anti-water? No human is illegal. Okay, yeah, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. However, there are humans who do illegal things, right? So the implication there is that, like, let's break down that one statement. No human is illegal, right? And nobody has ever made the claim that any human is illegal. But the implication is that because there are people who take a position that we should prevent, as a nation, illegal immigration, which is a thing. There is legal immigration and there is illegal immigration. Okay. Now, even and here's where I say that the ideology is also defective on the right, especially the far right, because people on the far right are against immigration. Okay. Period. They have a very nationalistic, like, we need to, like, just lock everyone out and not let anyone in. And that is not what has made our country so great. The fact that we have integrated all the cultures of the world into our society is what makes us so great. However, there needs to be a tension there. There needs to be a check and a balance there. You can't just let anyone and everyone in all at once. It would completely collapse your society. So, but the implication is, if you don't agree with me, which is that we should just let everyone in, well, then you believe humans are illegal, which is ludicrous, right?
Which is what some people have actually said. Like, how many illegals you got trapped down there in South End of Texas? Like, they use that as a slang word. So it's almost as if, because I subscribe to this one side of this ideology war, when I say no human is illegal, I'm directly choosing a side and taking conflict against the other side. So that's what I'm saying. The linguistic fuckery that's going on here is using a term that's basically neutral, that no one's arguing about. Like, nobody believes anybody's actually illegal, but it's now loaded and become like a trigger word or a source of identification even. Well,
no, it's become a virtue. This is, you've heard that term, virtue signaling, right? So what is my neighbor doing? He's virtue signaling. He's showing the world what a great person he is because he believes what everyone else believes. Like, it's ridiculous. It's patently absurd. But there is the implication there that people who don't share his ideology don't believe in those things, and the water
right.
is life.
Like there are people opposed to those things.
Right, exactly. You oppose my ideology, you oppose my preamble, right? And like I said, this is a tactic. This is a method used where it's like, I'm going to spit out a bunch of things that nobody really disagrees with. But the implication is that what I follow it with, if you disagree with that, then you disagree with my preamble, which was just a bunch of empty platitudes, right? Like, everyone should be treated equal. And if you don't go along with my $5 trillion plan to, completely reshape our nation, and again, she's not an economist. She is in no way fucking qualified. In fact, if you look at her plans, they're fucking ludicrous. There is no way they will achieve the results she claims they will achieve. But to disagree with her plan is to now oppose equality, is to now oppose what she preambled with, what she started off with, right? Which nobody's in disagreement with. And so again, this is a tactic, right? That I stand for these things that nobody stands against, but the implication being that if you oppose my ideology, if you oppose my approach and my solutions to these things, right? You can't have a different opinion here. Having a different opinion equates to you not agreeing with these tenets, right? These very simple platitudes. So that's
the linguistic fuckery that's going on here is by saying things that are completely not in disagreement, but right. using them as a way to enroll or to.
No, they're drawing a false equivalency there. Okay, so here's one of the ways people get enrolled, to use your word, in their conversation is the virtue, right? There's a false sense of virtue that if I agree and support and regurgitate her ideology or her ideological approach as a solution to these problems, assuming they are problems, then I hold these virtues. You see, there's a false equivalency there. All people should be treated fairly. Right? You say that, and then you follow it up with, so we need to take all the shit from white people and give it to brown people. Okay. Like, doesn't sound fair. And see, and this is where reason, rationale, we'll get into how they've undermined reason completely. Reason, logic, empiricism, they're against all that. Because again, there's a philosophy at work here. And it's not by accident, and it's not just mere stupidity. Now, AOC may very well be stupid. I'm not saying she's not. She may be, because I don't believe she's a mastermind of anything. I don't think she can mastermind a fucking ham sandwich. But
let's define the critical theory that we were talking about earlier, and how you actually were able to dissect it down to its core elements that we can overlay it and look at things through that lens.
All right, say that again.
Can we go to, can we explain a little bit about what critical theory is and those three elements that you brought up earlier so that we can kind of better understand what we're talking about here? Because
yes, absolutely. Because I also want people to be able to discern that this isn't a phenomenon strictly of the far left.
Exactly.
That this methodology of manipulation through language by way of critical theorists, or the methodology of critical theory, is being done everywhere. Like I broke it down earlier about Alex Jones. Alex Jones, clear cut, is a critical theorist. And here's why. Okay, so what makes critical theory critical theory? Now, some of you may be familiar with some of the critical theories. There's critical race theory, There's critical queer theory. There's critical gender theory. There's even critical law or critical legal theory, which actually goes back over 100 years at this point. That's where it first infiltrated our systems, was our legal system, okay? And it's bringing this, it's really born out of Marx's conflict theory, okay? They've just changed it and shifted it. And like I said, it's become a tool. The critical theories are now a tool of neo-Marxism and postmodernism or wokeness in order to destroy culture, destroy history, destroy the fabric of your society so that you can implement totalitarianism. Okay, that's its purpose, is to break down. So what are the common elements that exist in all critical theories? Aspect one, they all sell you a dream, okay? So, for instance, with critical race theory, what's the dream that they're selling? Equality. Now, it's really not equality, it's equity. They're promising you equal outcome. They're like, look, everyone's going to be rich, which again doesn't work, can never work. Or everyone's going to have all the same shit. Everyone's going to be the same, right? Everyone's going to have the same things. Everyone's going to have the same stuff. Everyone's going to have the same kind of life and the same luxuries. And this is equity, okay? And so that's the sunshine, right? That's the promise. That's the pie in the sky, okay? So there's the dream. They're selling you a dream. And then if I'll bring Alex Jones into it after I've defined the three elements. Part two of any critical theory is the problemization, okay? You not only do you critique and identify only the problems that you identify as being what is preventing the dream, okay? So for instance, in critical race theory, they're saying, well, we have unequal outcomes in some aspect of our society. What do we blame that on? It's systemic racism. Can you point to and identify systemic racism? No, that's the point. Okay, this problemization is creating victims. It's creating problems. It's purely a critique. Okay, and the third element of all critical theories is no solution, because it's amorphous. When you problemize it, it's an amorphous problemization that cannot be fixed, because you can't actually point to an actual problem. You can only point to something amorphous. And so it just becomes a whirlwind of complaining and victimization.
Well,
and
what happens is the solution is tear it all down, burn it all down.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then we'll see where we're at.
And no plan. No, here's what we got to do, which is what you see in really now there's a critical policing theory, right? That we just need to abolish police, right? And really that is also, they want to abolish prisons, okay? So they're like, abolish police, abolish prisons. It's problematic. It's systemically racist, blah, 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 blah. All they do is critique. They would never bring up any of the positive elements of it, right? That's not the purpose of it, because the purpose is just tear it down. Well, what do we do instead? We're not worried about that. We're not worried about what we're going to do about it. There is no remedy. There is no solution. The theory goes and now again, remember, these are just tools of neo-Marxism. And this is how Marxism works. There is no plan in Marxism. The plan is tear everything down, put the state in charge, and a utopia will just magically fucking appear out of nowhere. That's Marxism, okay? It's like a 7-year-old's approach to economics. That's Marxism, okay? So
this is something that I've ran into a bunch around probably in the last month or so. And just talking with people that are really supporters of some of these things. And
right.
I always get down to the question of, okay, once it's all burned to the ground, once we have no police, once we have no, corrupt or white supremacy or whatever. Once everything's equal and we burn everything to the ground, then what are we going to rebuild? What are we going to do moving forward so that we don't end up with the same problem, or that we end up better than when we left, when we started engaging with this problem? How do we improve? How do we grow? How do we move past all of this? And not a single person has been able to give me any type of answer to that.
Because it's an articulated plan.
It's like this in charge, or we can have actual economics deal with our economics, and there's all of these ideas of who to put where, but there is no, we need to build a system that functions like this, or that motivates this, or that there's no solution.
No, because in reality, now it's not that they don't have a plan. They have what I'll call as a framework. It's not a clear-cut plan, but their idea is, and again, this is Marxism, right? Neo-Marxism is, we'll put all the fucking professors in charge, okay? All the people who are pushing this to your kids in universities, they should be in charge because they're smart people, and they're smarter than all of you. And even though they haven't in 100 years come up with a clear-cut plan, the plan is just put us in charge. That's their fucking plan. And that's why you have these critical theorists flooding into not only academia now, they are infiltrating every aspect of our culture. They're in every corporation. That's why Coca-Cola commercials are all woke as fuck. They're in the NFL. They're in the NBA. It's everywhere. The critical theorists have infiltrated every aspect of our culture. And their plan is, as soon as we tear everything down, we're going to be in charge. And we're going to figure it out. Again, in 100 years, they haven't figured it out yet. They haven't come up with a clear plan in over 100 years for this communist utopia, but they're pretty sure that if you just put them in charge, it's all going to work out.
Well, I got to tell you, man, some of it sounds pretty appealing. Like everybody having fair, equal opportunities, no racism, no, unfairness or whatever. Some of that feels pretty good. And it's hitting on some of those emotional points. I could see not being very, to take some of your distinctions you were talking about, if I wasn't able to see past the pie in the sky, the dream of this utopia where everybody is everything's fair, then I wouldn't be able to see the shortcomings, or that there was no actual path to get there. Just if everything's going to be fair, but first we need to defund the police. For me, because I think through stuff, I'm like, how does that get us to the goal? But somebody else may be like, I still want the pie in the sky, so let's do it. I don't know why we're doing it, but let's do it. And so I don't really think it's the critical theorists that are infiltrating, but the theories themselves, the feel-goodness of it, the PC-ness of it is so easy to adhere to because like the sign, Black Lives Matter, no one's going to argue with that. Of course they do. And so I should probably join your movement since I believe the same thing you do. And so it's like a downhill. It's really easy to fall into it and to start regurgitating this stuff because it's stuff that no one's arguing about. It's of course I believe that I should be defunding the police too.
And actually we'll get into why people are susceptible to that. Because there is something there. And it goes along right with what you're saying, that people fall into it, but and like you said, you think it through, but what has people just fall into it without thinking it through? Without what's your plan after that? Right? People fall into it unquestioningly. And that's where why this is such an insidious method at work here. And
like
and
we
again,
said, this is not just political stuff. You go to a car dealership and the guy's selling you driving around a convertible red hot rod Porsche or something on Sundays with the hair in your wind and your lady in your arm, and you're like, oh my God, I want that dream. How much is the Porsche? This is the only way I can get to my dream. And there's no logical thought then of, if I have the Porsche and I spend all this money, what could go wrong? The dream's next. There's There's a bit of a disconnect going on.
And again, so
this isn't just political. What I'm saying is it permeates all aspects of our societies right now.
Yeah, but there's not a direct correlation there in that the car salesman isn't going to problematize what's in the way of your dream and then get you upset about it and say, we need to tear down this thing that's between you and the Porsche. You know what I mean?
This hunk of junk you're driving, that doesn't fit your personality. Aren't you a lion? You're not a sheep, are you? I mean, there's like that type of conversation that goes on all the time.
Right. It could go there. I just want to say that that's not a direct correlation. I don't want to confuse or muddle what we're talking about here, because there's a very deliberate, like a salesman, he's not, I can't even say that, I guess. Gosh, you've really painted me into a corner with this salesman.
We could use a different example.
I was going to say, there's no underhanded. Well, yeah, most salesmen, there is some kind of underhanded something going on, especially if they're selling you something that they know is inferior to how they're talking about it, right? But let's move out.
He's got a bad timing belt. And they know it's going to blow up or something.
Right. Yeah. They know it's a piece of shit, and they're just talking and they're just telling you about the dream so that somebody else can service the nightmare. So
that was a good analogy.
Yeah. And that's kind of this methodology. That's kind of where this whole ideology is heading, is that the language is being used to push and to manipulate. And like I said, I've given you the three elements. And those three elements, like I talked about earlier, are present in everywhere. This isn't a phenomenon of the left. This is a phenomenon that you see on the right. If you break down anything and everything Alex Jones has ever said, it fits perfectly into this model. He's a critical theorist in that he's selling the dream, right? Remember his website back years ago, I don't know what it is anymore, but used to be Prison Planet, right? So what he's problematized, he's saying everyone's a prisoner, right? Everyone's enslaved, right? Well, what's the dream he's selling? Well, freedom, liberty, right? This is the dream, okay? And then, but he just sticks in the whirlwind of the problematization. Right? I've never, in anything I've ever heard come from him, heard about what specifically do we need to change, and what specifically are we going to do about it? Can we do about it? So at the very least, it's mere fear mongering, but at the worst, it's critical theory at work. And it's deliberately, and I'm okay. I don't want to say deliberately, because I don't want to say that he's even consciously aware of this, because we see this in all aspects of society and culture, of the same method of language being used to manipulate. Okay. So I don't think he's necessarily a bad guy. I don't know whether he is or not. I can't say for certain whether or not he has good or bad intentions. I'm just saying the way that he approaches everything is as a critical theorist, which all that can lead to is a tearing down with nothing to replace it with. Which, if this were deliberate, I would say, okay, this is a concerted effort being played out on all parts of the spectrum. And so that we're having all people in all ideologies that they've bought into working towards the same goal, whether they realize it or not. They all think they're against each other, but they're actually working towards the same thing, which is a complete destruction of the system, right? Which, again, not that the system, if we could call the system, not that the system is good or bad, but it's destroying the culture that will have extraordinarily, at the least, complicated results, if not devastating results, on us, on our families, on our society, right? So this is an underhanded way of undermining and eroding culture, is using these methods, this language. Okay. And like I said, so you also have to be aware. So I'll get into what makes you susceptible to it, but I also want to talk about like the people who do, because there's actually a way that they justify this. Okay. But it's based in their ideology. And so when you understand the ideology, which most people don't, okay, all the people that kind of just go along with this wokeness shit, they don't know any of the ideology. Okay. But there's a rationale within the ideology. And, you know, even though they say science is real, science for them is a slogan. There is at work what I'll call critical science theory, where they're taking these same elements. Remember, I said, if you can identify these elements, and specifically with the critical theories, one of the essential elements in creating conflict is creating something to conflict with. So they, right now, with critical race theories, with critical queer theory, critical gender theory, there's the oppressive, the oppressor, and the oppressed, all being played out, all being identified within these theories so that we can create conflict. Okay, so that's one of the main tools used in this language is this conflict. Now, so what you're seeing, I don't know how many of you have seen in the news and things like that, where they're starting to call things like science a form of white supremacy. They're calling mathematics a form of white supremacy. So again, they're bringing conflict into science. They're bringing conflict into mathematics. And there's now you're seeing academics. I don't know whether I can call people who are actually in academia, let's say as a professor of biology, a biologist, because they just teach. And these people are so disconnected from the real world that you have academic biologists claiming that there is no biological difference, or there is no difference besides sociological differences between men and women. This is a fucking biologist, okay? Meaning this biologist cannot identify a vagina or a penis, clearly. So there's something seriously wrong that this is now infiltrated, what we call science. So when you hear them claim that they follow the science, right? It isn't science. Science is a method, right? Science is a method. Science is something that there's empirical elements to it. There's logical elements to it. There's a method to establishing your theories and your conclusions and the process of experimentation. Like, science is a method. But what they
just to quickly add to that, Brandon,
that supports their agenda, their ideology, and it's not science at all. It's a slogan.
Science necessitates scrutiny, and any good scientist knows that you come up with a theory and you test it, and if it works, you put it out there into the community, and it gets peer reviewed and retested and over and over and over, and it has to endure a certain amount of scrutiny in order for it to be accepted as a working theory within the scientific community. And what we're seeing now is that this is the science. This doctor said so. We believe our doctors, not your doctors. The scrutiny has disappeared. That's not part of what they're calling science. And so it can't actually be labeled as science.
No, and it's not. And again, so what's the process they use to justify this within their own ideology is that they don't believe. Okay, and so this comes right out of postmodernism. They don't believe in reason. They don't believe you can be rational or reasonable. Like, this is why identity politics plays such a big part within their theories, okay? And why they use phrases like lived experience, right? See, and they use terms like my truth, right? These are nonsensical phrases that mean nothing but allow them to justify their position that there is no objective facts or truth, that all meta-narratives are meaningless, and they consider science a meta-narrative, okay? So
Linguistic
science, and that's why they can call it racist, right? They go, well, that's just white supremacy. That's all science is, even though, you know, we've used science to produce some pretty miraculous things. So the method itself is, you know, it's pretty well proven. You know, we've done some amazing things with science. So to just discount it wholly because you believe their ideology is that there is no rationale, that each individual, based on their identity, okay, this is why identity politics is such an important aspect of their theories, that your identity is what determines reality, okay? Meaning, science may say you're a man, but if you feel you're a woman, well, then you're a woman. Fact. That's a fact in their world, okay? So they completely discount any form of empiricism, any scientific methodology. This does not work within their theories. Okay, this goes against their philosophy. Okay, which is really adopts and embraces this kind of absolute relativism. You know, where there is absolutely no objective anything. Everything is subjective, and everything is, and because of that, the only thing they believe in is that everything is about power. Okay, this is their theories. This is neomarxism. This is postmodernism. This is wokeness. Everything is about power. That's it. That is the extent of their reality. And so,
right?
What's that?
Specifically power over something, not power with something, like we talk about.
No. That's why everything's broken down.
Like tyrannical control.
Well, yeah. Well, that's why and I don't know if necessarily what I want to call it tyrannical control, but the way they rationalize it is that it's that there is groups, right? Because it's all about group identity, that are oppressive and therefore oppressors, and there are groups that are oppressed. So it's a permanent label of victim and victimizer. Okay? And there is no getting out of this. And so this is how they can rationalize that, oh, you're a cisgendered white male. Well, then your opinion means nothing. You can't even speak. Your opinion has no value because you don't have my lived experience. And even if here's the funny thing. Here's the funniest thing, right? So, okay, they've already labeled all cisgendered white males are the devil, basically. And so you hold no weight. Your words have no meaning and have no value. You as a person have no value. In fact, that's why I can get away with on Twitter saying, I think we should kill all white men. And guess what? Twitter ain't going to take that tweet down or ban that person. In fact, that person works for the New York Times now after she's tweeted that we should kill all white men. Okay? That's perfectly acceptable. Okay? Because white men have historically, again, this is their ideology, have had power over everyone else on the planet, evidently. So they have no value within their ideological structure. Okay? However, let's say you're a black man who does not hold their opinions. Oh, they've got a label for you too. You're complicit in white supremacy. Meaning, if you say it's ridiculous that mathematics is somehow, systemically racist, oh, well, then you're just complicit. And they have this idea that you hold a false consciousness. So even though by quote unquote identity, let's say you're a black lesbian woman and you don't agree with them. Well, you still don't get in. It's all about the ideology. You could be a black lesbian woman. I mean, you've got like 3-4 ticks on the identity politics bingo card. And because you hold a differing opinion, they just label you complicit of the oppressors. You are complicit with the oppressors. You have a false consciousness. Okay, so this is how they justify all of this. Okay, I think it's important to understand how the ideology works, why they think the way they do. But again, none of this stands up to any kind of reasoning or rationale or logic. It all falls apart very quickly. Okay.
It's just linguistic fuckery.
It is, absolutely. So how is it that the average person who can't justify this because they don't know these ideological justifications that I've just told you about, the average person doesn't know any of this. So how do they get caught up in it? Why do they go along with it? Why are they not critical in thinking of these theories, of this linguistic fuckery that they get caught up in, buy into, believe, and then regurgitate? What's in the gap here? Why does that happen? Okay.
And actually, I've got one other question to add on to that. At what point does it become dangerous? Because some people just go along with it because they do believe, love is love or whatever was on that sign. And then it gets to a point where they're like, yeah, let's defund the police. And there's a line there. Like, you can go around supporting love all you want to, but at what point does that go too far?
I would say right from the beginning. Because in reality, they don't stop at love is love. That's a slogan. That gets their foot in the door. They're going to follow that up with something, right? They don't just run around going, love is love, love is love. No, it never stops there. It's always going further, right? So that's just the slogans, and they're just empty slogans. Like, oh, we follow the science. Yeah, no, you don't. That ain't fucking science. That's an empty slogan. What? Wow. Just because you use the word science and you use the word research, okay, show me the science. Show me the research. I want to see this biologist, the science that proves there's no biological difference between men and women. I want to see that. I'd like to see how the fuck she mind fucked herself so good that she could say that as a biologist. I want to see that science. But the reality is that's not science. There is no science. It's a slogan. Okay, so let's get back to why are people susceptible to this? And it's actually very simple. It's about you being able to be authentic and accepting yourself authentically. Now, that seems on its surface to be relatively easy. Aren't we all authentic? Let me ask you this. How many people live their lives through a social media network profile? What are you selling in your social media network profile, right? So, for instance, Facebook. These people are all have profiles, and they believe that these people who are labeled as friends, some of them you may have never even met in person, are friends, right? So this is a pseudo reality. This is not at all authentic. You're curating an image of yourself. And so this is why it's become so prevalent. And again, even before social networking, people have a difficulty in authenticity because our tendency as human beings is to be liked, to be accepted, right? And so often people find it difficult to be authentic because if somebody doesn't like you being authentic, they don't like you, the real you. And that's a lot more painful and harder for people to accept than if they're just playing a role. And so people start to curate an image of who they are. And this is what they present, not only on their Facebook profile, but in life. And we actually start this at a pretty young age. In fact, it's, right preteen area, part of our lives, depending on the individual, but somewhere between the ages of 9 and 13 is when we begin to curate an image of who we are. Okay. And this is because we want to be accepted. We want to be part of a group. We want to have peers. We want to be liked. And so we start at a young age just to curate an image of ourselves. And so the authentic you oftentimes isn't even a mature adult because you started at such a young age to curate an image of yourself and you never let yourself be who you really are, which is an interesting kind of paradox because it's kind of like if you try to teach someone how to meditate, right? How do you meditate? Well, stop doing what's not meditation, right? It's how do you be authentic? Well, stop being inauthentic. Like it's stop pretending or stop being something you're not, right? And that's just like, because meditation you could define as being in nothing, right? Doing nothing. So how do you meditate? Well, stop doing other stuff, right? Stop doing everything else. Stop thinking, stop fidgeting, stop focusing your attention. Like you just have to let go of everything else you're doing in order to meditate. And that's kind of like being authentic is letting go of that curated image, letting go of being that image that you've created for yourself. And in doing that, and again, that takes also being secure with who you are and being okay with not being liked, okay, for who you are. So it definitely takes an extraordinary amount of courage because we're social beings. And so our tendency is to be accepted, to be liked, to look good, right? To be right. Like these are all aspects that we desire in our social interactions. And so it drives us to be inauthentic. It drives us to curate an image of who we are. But when you're authentic and you accept you for who you are, and you no longer have to appear to people in a certain way, you no longer have to be liked, you no longer have to be accepted, well, then you can question what everyone else is just going along with, right? You can think about these ideas and break them down and even talk about the incongruencies and the problems with them, the defectiveness, the illogical, unrational aspects of them. Because you're not concerned with being accepted, being liked. You accept you for who you are. And so you don't need the acceptance, approval. You don't need to be liked. You don't need to be right. You don't need to look good. So there's, in that being authentic sounds simple, but it requires not being the image that you've spent most of your life curating of who you are. And first you have to identify that. You have to identify all those elements that you've made up over the years about who you are, what you are, that that you believe has created your friendships. Like a lot of again, people have a tendency to play these roles, and then their relationships are created out of these roles, and they're creating relationships with people who are also playing roles. And because we're playing similar roles, we now are friends, but this is not authentic or genuine friendship. This is two fake people with a fake friendship. And so this is something that requires us to be, for one, reflective of how we are and why we do what we do, right? So it takes a presence of mind in recognizing in everything that we do, in everything that we say, like questioning, why did I just say that? Right? Like, especially if you find yourself just saying things that aren't necessarily true or that you don't necessarily believe, like why? Why did I just say that? Do I need to be liked here? Am I afraid of conflict or confrontation? Right? So it takes it takes really a deconstruction of that subjective self-image that we've curated over years and years and years and years and years, but you have to become present to it. You have to become aware of it. You have to recognize it and see it before you can start to deconstruct it and let it go. And then, why? Well, let me ask you, Junji, why do you think I would make that? Why do I think that would be an effective solution to the manipulation through language?
Well, I'd say if we're in the practice of being authentic and asking questions, then we're not just going to go along with an ideology because it's popular. We're not going to go along with it because it's cool or it's PC or it's it's what everybody's doing, or it's not some big pie in the sky. We're going to look at it, know where we stand with it, and then make up our own mind about it instead of being swept away by the undercurrent.
Right. And there's that element of virtue there as well. When you can be you authentically, and then you recognize your virtues, you don't need to follow an ideology. You don't need to regurgitate phrases to gain some sense of false virtue. Because remember, that's one of the things they're selling. And that's one of the reasons people are buying. Because people live these inauthentic lives, so they don't recognize their own virtues. They don't even know their own values. They don't know their morals. They have become disconnected from their authentic self, and therefore they're disconnected from any sense of authentic values that they may hold or virtues that they may have. And so in order to get in touch with your virtues, your real virtues, you must get in touch with the authentic you. And then once you recognize your virtues, well, then you don't need to virtue signal, right? Because you already recognize that you have authentic virtues because you are authentically being you, and you recognize the virtues of your authenticity and the other virtues that you have. So you don't need to try to convince someone through some mindless action or phrase that you have virtue. And so you can see why I've said that in especially in the last 10 years, because of social media, because people are curating these false images at a higher degree than we ever have in history, right? 100 years ago, the only social interactions you had, for the most part, a majority, was in person with people, like actually face to face. Now, does it mean that people were all authentic? No, people were still curating images of who they were, but it wasn't in every aspect of your life all the time. People are now living their lives through Facebook profiles, like selling that image all the time, even when they meet people in person. They're reflecting that Facebook profile, right? They're being what that Facebook profile says they are.
And more than that, it almost feels like I've spent so much time focusing on this curation process that, and it's not just Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, but it's other sites that you put yourself out there. It's dating apps like Tinder. It's all of these non-physical interactions that we do with people. We spend so much time focusing on creating this image to push out through the internet that we start to believe that that's actually who we are. And we start to justify it and defend it. And really starting to pull apart at it is risking who we actually think we are, risking our own identity. So it's something I see a lot of people deeply protect and defend. It's not something that's easy sometimes for people to just, oh, look at that, I'm being inauthentic, let me just shift. That takes some practice and some skill to be able to just, on a dime, shift your come from or shift how you're being in the moment. But the more you practice it, that's why I started earlier with when we're in the practice of authenticity, meaning it's not just like I'm being an authentic person, awesome, here we go. It's that I'm actively in the process of identifying when I'm being authentic and when I'm not being authentic. And I mean, I'm no master at this. I still notice every day there's something that pops up. Like yesterday, I did something and my girlfriend was like, why did you do that? And I felt her judgment behind the question. And I automatically started defending. And then, we got into an argument and stuff, and we got home and went in different rooms for a couple of minutes. And I had a moment to reflect in some quiet. And I was like, why did I just have a reaction to defend this the way that I laughed about something? As if I believe that how I acted is who I am. And then why did I have to turn it around and make it into an argument and escalate it the way that I did? It was completely unconscious. But noticing that pattern, I'm like, wow, look at that. That's something I do. I can authentically look at it and notice the pattern. And then next time I see that trigger, I can say, oh, this is when that pattern usually comes up. Or last time, this is what happened, and I'm going to be present to how it unfolds this time. So it's constantly being in the practice of authenticity, for me, is truly the game. Because there is no, like most everything else, there is no arriving at this. Sometimes I'm authentic, sometimes I'm not authentic, and I imagine it's the same for most everybody else.
Right.
I mean, everyone else over the age of 6 or whatever. Kids are 100% authentic. We learned this inauthenticity game.
Right. It was funny. I was at the grocery store yesterday or the day before, I forget. But there was this guy in line ahead of me, and he had like a 4-year-old with him. And she was kind of, playing around, and the checkout clerk was, trying to interact with her and, have fun with her or whatever. And so there's there's an engagement happening between the three of them, between the dad, the daughter, and the checkout clerk, right? And as they're leaving, the dad goes, "Do you want to say goodbye? You want to say goodbye?" And the checkout clerk's all, "Bye," and the girl just shakes her head no. Like, no, I don't.
Not interested.
Not interested. I have very little doubt that I'll ever see this person again. But she was clear. She was totally clear. Like, no, I don't want to say goodbye.
Oh, how rude.
You're absolutely right. For a 4-year-old, there's nothing but authenticity, right? And we become domesticated over time. And I'd say it gets the worst when we get into our preteens, because now all our peers are a part of the domestication process, because they're all.
Do we lose you? Did you lose me?
All trying to adopt an identity. They're trying to force identities on you. You're trying to take on an identity. You know, like.
Is that just me, or is anybody else hearing Brandon?
No, I can hear him doing that too.
I can hear you, Jim. I just can't hear Brandon.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay. I was tripping out for a second.
Telegram cut me out. Cut me out.
Well, no, you would up really fast.
Yeah, it was like
it
treated you like a rubber band. Like it would stop your audio, but then it would come back in, and everything that you said in 30 seconds would be done in 5 seconds.
Oh wow! I've heard that with other people. Like, whoa! All right, can you say that again?
Trippy. And can you say that again?
Yeah, I don't even know what I was saying. Oh, I know I was talking about authenticity of children and how we get domesticated, and that domestication really goes into overdrive in our preteens, because we're struggling for identity. The kids around us, our peers, are struggling for identity, and we want acceptance, and we want to be liked, and so we start to curate an image of ourselves. So inauthenticity is it's like a part of the human condition. It's part of our domestication, right? To make us basically acceptable. Because there's also a confusion around authenticity and just being a dick. Like some people, they think being authentic is just being rude and uncouth. Like no, just because you spoke your mind in that moment, what's really behind what you said? Like maybe, it may just come across as rude or whatever, but it doesn't mean it's authentic. You know what I mean? Because you could be still coming from a place of wanting to portray an image of who you are, and that's part of the image is in this moment when I'm confronted in this type of a situation, I go to being rude or I go to being angry, and this is really, it's still part of a curated image. So don't confuse rudeness or brashness or brazenness with authenticity.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Dana.
absolutely.
I was just gonna say I do feel like there's different levels of being authentic, and when I say that, meaning, tone of voice. I'm a very nonverbal. Before I don't even have to say something, most people will be like, oh, they can see it in my face or my hands or whatever. So,
right.
That's all things to be present about when being authentic. That's all.
Yeah. I've actually gotten that feedback from people in the past where they've told me straight up, like, dude, you're either really bad at hiding how you feel or what's going on for you, or you just don't care. Because like I've been told, I just kind of wear my heart on my sleeve. I guess it shows up in my face. Like if I'm disgusted by what you just said, you'll know it because it shows up in my face. I don't have to say a word, but I guess just the look on my face tells the whole story of my reaction to what you just said or whatever.
That reminds me of a certain participant that we had the pleasure of working with over and over and over and over. And when we happened to be in Puerto Rico doing the men's retreat, he was talking about how his girlfriend, how he never is able to keep a girlfriend. And his last girlfriend left him because she came in the room and literally asked him, do I look fat in this dress? And he looked at her and was like, yep, absolutely. And she was like, well, I couldn't believe you said that to me. I can't believe you think I look fat. And she dumped him and left. And he was like, well, it's her problem. She's got the issues with being fat, and she's the one that asked me the question, so she wanted an answer. I was just being authentic. Like, no. You were being clueless to what was going on. And being brass or something like that. Like,
yeah.
Maybe you can speak into that a little bit, because I'm trying to throw that in there with some context.
Yeah,
but
I know exactly who you're talking about, because he had another story about he got beat up at a club because he was dancing with other guys' girlfriends.
Yep, same
and
here.
he's acting clueless. Like, why were they mad? I'm like, and I don't know if you've seen him dance, like salsa dance, dude. For one, he's absolutely amazing. Oh, dude, he's amazing. But dude, if he was dancing like that with my girlfriend, yeah, that, be aware, be present, dude. Like, you're probably pissing a lot of people off if you're dancing with their girlfriends like that, So yeah, and again, he may be being authentic. Like, I'm not gonna say he's necessarily being inauthentic. He may be being authentic in that moment. Yes, he may be being obtuse, like ignorant of how others will react. And I think that this is how and why we cap our authenticity, is because most of us are mindful in how people react to us. Now, and there's also a difference between authenticity and honesty, right? He may have been honest, right? But there is a distinction there, right? Like, when he told his girlfriend she looked fat, was that the right moment?
Well, I mean, if she's gonna ask a question, I feel like at least Justin, he's always said, if you're gonna ask me a question, I'm gonna give you, the answer. It might not be the answer that you want to hear, but I mean, if you're, so I feel like if she asks that, then she should be open to whatever feedback she's going to get. I mean, and that goes for anybody, really.
It does, but there's also, and again, now I'm just going off of my experience personally, and I know that there's also an aspect of the feminine, right, where they're not necessarily asking because they want honest feedback in that moment. What they're looking for is some kind of affirmation, some kind of confirmation, right? There's an insecurity there, right? And if you're mindful and present to that, you may be more tactful in your response. I'm not saying you have to be dishonest, right? Because you can be honest and not answer the question directly, right? You can say, "Oh, baby, you look good." Right? I didn't really answer the question there, but you know what? She loves the answer. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't say she didn't look fat. I didn't say she does look fat. I just said, "Ooh, baby, you look good." Right? And she's going to love that answer. Because, for one, the feminine isn't necessarily looking for a logical, rational, reasonable response necessarily.
There's no direct communication usually.
Right. Exactly. That's how men think that way. And so our natural tendency would be to answer directly. But those of us who have been in relationships have learned throughout the years that you need to be more tactful, because she's not necessarily looking for the answer to her question, or maybe not a direct answer. She wants to know, am I appealing to you? Right? That's the subtext there.
Or she's fishing for a compliment. Like, I wish I got a compliment right now. Hey, how do I look? Like, it's with feminine energy specifically, and this doesn't, specifically fit to just women, but anyone who's coming from that feminine space, it's more about the context than about the point. So if I said, how do I look in this dress? If you're able to be present to the context of the question, you'll understand it more completely than if you just go off of the words that exist. Whereas the masculine side of it would be, this is exactly the words I'm using to get to the exact point that I'm trying to make, and I want an exact, direct answer.
Right.
Like sometimes my girlfriend does this all the time, actually. I'll say, like, you know, I was thinking about getting some burgers for us. Do you want a burger for dinner tonight? And she'd look at me and go, I've eaten so many carbs this week already. And I'm like, oh my God, is that a yes? Is it a no? You want me to get you a lettuce wrapped burger? I'm like, then I have to go fishing through it. But if I pull back and I've been present to her all week, then I can remember the conversations that she's had around carbs and burgers and everything else, and realize that in her saying that, addressing the context of her answer, oh, it makes sense to me. She doesn't want a burger tonight because, you know, she doesn't like burgers without buns, and it has a bunch of carbs and blah, 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 blah. And so the context is crucial. So Kendi, whatever his name was. So our buddy in that example of the do I look fat in this dress, there is a bigger context that's being addressed there. And if she was earlier talking about how he doesn't compliment enough, or if she was, you know, feeling really hot and good and she just wanted to, you know, a little affirmation or something, she could be looking for compliments. She could be looking to test him. She could be on her last straw and giving him a test. Let's watch him fail this one and I'm out, which might have been what happened. So that's the feminine energy that's more of the context, whereas the masculine energy is more of the point. If that makes sense. So can we maybe bring this around full circle a little bit? Brandon, I'd love for you to go back over the three elements of critical theory. I only wrote down one of them, selling the dream, but then I remember there was conflict and then maybe like no solution or something like that. Like,
so there's the conflict. So, and I guess that's as good a word as any, is the second aspect. I've also used the word to describe that aspect as problem, like creating a problem, problematizing. But it's an identification of, it's identifying in a negative way that which stands between you and the dream, right? So, like, for instance, those who want to abolish the police, what they'll start to do is just identify all negative aspects of policing, right? They won't recognize or acknowledge anything good about policing, right? And again, this is the same thing Alex Jones would do if he was talking about, you know, gay frogs or something. Like, he's going to take the same kind of approach where the dream is always contextual with him. And it's all about freedom and liberty, right? We need to be free. We need to be, you know, we need to have liberty. That's kind of the dream he's always selling. So that's contextual with his conversations. But what he does is he starts to identify problems. And then he identifies an amorphous enemy, right? And this is being done all over, you know, the deep state or the establishment or the elite, right? So it's this amorphous thing. You're not clearly identifying anything, right? To like, okay, let's address this, right? Because in reality, he's not looking for a solution. He's not looking for a remedy. And now, again, I'm not saying that there's any malintent with anything he's saying. I don't know that. For all I know, he has the best of intentions, and all he cares about is people's freedom and liberty. And, you know, that may be honestly what he wants, but his approach isn't going to achieve that. These approaches can never achieve anything because they have no clear goal. They have no clear way of achieving it. There's no plan, right? It's just a whirlwind of complaint. Right?
Well, it's like nearsightedness, right? It's right, like not being able to see past the problem.
Right, and it's and again, with a person who's being intentionally a critical theorist, it needs to be perpetual, because you need to perpetually be a victim, or you need to perpetually be the victimizer. So that's a perpetual condition that can never be addressed, because then it can always be pulled out and say, we need to tear down more. We need to tear down more. We need to tear down more. And I guarantee you, if they actually achieve, let's say, abolishing the police, every police department, every prison completely shut down, right? And then, of course, murder rates spike, all kinds of crazy shit starts happening. You know what they're going to blame it on? Come on, man.
White supremacy, institutional racism.
Exactly. They just fall back right back on it. Well, it's because there's still institutional racism. It's because there's white privilege. So they just fall right back into that same conversation, right?
I actually just heard somebody talking just like the other day, watching some video trying to get ready for this call, and she was going on and on about, like, in order to understand this entire situation, you have to look at it through the lens or the framework of, like, oppressor and oppressed. Otherwise, you can't see directly what's going on. And I'm like, but if you're always looking through that lens, what else could you see? What else is possible to see? So even if everything's gone, you're still going to be like, oh, look at that guy, that's an oppressor, finding in some way, instead of being open to however else these people could show up. Or even if all they ever looked through was the lens of the solution. Oh, this is just something we got to get back on track. Then they're going to end up getting to a solution or experiencing the solution. But that's absolutely not what's going on. So I didn't really put it together until you said that. But that's absolutely right. It's getting into a perpetual state of oppressor and oppressed. And as long as you look at it through that lens, she's absolutely right. You'll completely understand the entire argument, but you'll also never be able to solve or get out of that argument with looking through that lens.
No. Yeah. And that's, again, it's not designed. Yeah. It's perpetual. Yeah. It's designed. The approach is designed to be perpetual. It's not actually trying to achieve a solution. I mean, if they really wanted equality, right? And they wanted people to be treated fairly, and they wanted justice. I mean, these are their slogans, right? Would they be pushing racism? Because that's what they're doing. They're pushing racism. So if you want fairness, if you want equality, if you want justice, how do you push racism? And see, again, now by my rationale, because I'm actually rationalizing this, using logic and reason to do so, it doesn't work out. It's a fallacy. I could see it on its face. But because their rationale comes from a place that it's all about power, right? So if I'm redistributing, if I'm taking all white people's shit and giving it to brown people, that's okay. That's not racist. That's perfectly fair, because it's all about power. And historically, notice they're never actually addressing right now, right? There's historical oppression, right? These are the words they use. People who have been historically oppressed, right? Are they being oppressed right now? And if they are, well, let's address that. How are they being oppressed? By whom are they being oppressed? Because that we can address. But no, you speak in these amorphous terms. These are historically oppressed people, right? Right? And now they've got historical trauma. Oh my God, my great-great-grandparents went through some shit and it's fucking tearing me apart. That's ridiculous. I mean, my great-great-grandparents went through some shit, but it doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form.
They all went through some shit.
Exactly. There's not one
200 years ago was not the easiest of surviving.
Yeah. So in reality, everyone's ancestors at some point went through some really gnarly shit, right? But this is not an actual justification. And this is why it can be used in perpetuity. It could be a perpetual condition, because you're not actually even addressing the moment. You're saying these people are historically oppressed. I guarantee you, if the eradication of white people happened, which it seems like is what they want, right? So, okay, all the white people are gone. We got rid of the devil. Got rid of all the white men, especially the cisgendered ones. We got rid of all the white women. All their white ancestors are all gone, right? Well, who's next on the list? It would be the Hispanics or the Asians. No, the Asians would get it bad.
The
Yeah,
Spanish.
it'd be the Asians next. Yeah, because
French.
they excel. Well, because based on their culture, the Asian culture, like right now, the Asians are just kind of sitting quietly like, fuck, we're not getting into this. Because if somebody shines the light on them, they're like, well, on average, Asians make more money than every other demographic. They're more successful in all domains of life. like they're more likely to have a family that is sustained and maintained, like an actual nuclear family. Parents stay married, kids are brought up in 2-parent homes. They're more successful on average per capita in school. They're more successful on average in the workplace. They achieve higher positions on average. They make more money on average per capita than any other demographic. So they'd be next. And they'd be called the oppressor.
It's already happening. It's already happening.
With Asians?
It's Asians. Yeah, it's clearly they're number 2. And number 3 is going to be quote unquote conservative Hispanics. I mean, it's all about who's on top when this is all over. And the professors are hoping they're the ones that are going to be on top when this is all over.
Well, that's the only we talked about earlier how they don't have a plan. They've never spelled out a plan. Well, the plan is that they'll all be in charge. See, if you read all the literature from these communists over the decades, they allude to, well, then all the intelligentsia, all the smart people would take charge. Because we know how to make this work, because we're professors, we're smart people, we're intelligent. And so we would work out a system that would be fair and equitable to everyone. Everyone it'd be a utopia. Just put a bunch of professors who can't even make it in the real world. Okay, mind you, that's why they're professors. Okay, these are people that have no actual real world experience at creating anything. That's why it was such a monumental failure in the Soviet Union. It's why it was such a monumental failure in China. I mean, China literally fell on its face, starved 80 million people. Mao finally dies. And in the last couple decades, they've elevated more people out of poverty in less time than ever in history. How did they do that? They adopted capitalism. That's the funny thing. Clearly the economic model of their utopia is so dysfunctional that all it ever does is destroy. And China was able to elevate itself out of poverty by adopting capitalism. So they're this weird hybrid system of communism/capitalism that is the only reason that they've made it this far, is because they adopted some form of capitalism. But it absolutely, they would always be identifying a new oppressor. And it would Go ahead.
I was going to say, you know what they say, and my parents, who are both teachers, hate it, and my brother hates it when I say it. If you can't teach, right? You can't make it in the real world, you teach. They hate it when I say that. But yeah, that's the only expression. You can't teach.
Now I kind of feel bad about saying it, because I didn't realize it was going so close to home, that you're related to 3 professors.
Not professors, not professors. A shop teacher, an art teacher.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So, but not that there aren't good people who teach. You know what I mean? I don't want to play them all out as, as these fiends of our culture, trying to undermine everything. It's really a small percentage. Most teachers, especially elementary school teachers, high school teachers, they mostly got into it because they wanted to do something positive in their community. They wanted to educate, they wanted to elevate, a lot of them, just like police officers, not all police officers, but a lot of them, they got into it because they have some sense of duty within their community. They want to do some kind of good. Same with people who get into the military. Not all, but a lot of them, they want to do something, positive, and there's even politicians who actually got into politics with the idea that they were going to do something for their community. They wanted to have a positive effect within their community. I know I can name at least one. Like, to me, Tulsi Gabbard genuinely seems like someone who really wanted to do something good for her community. She spent a couple years in Washington, realized she was among the worst people on earth, and got out. It was like our best chance at having an honest, politician in Washington. And she's gone, so it didn't last long. But they're very few and far between. And when I speak about the intelligentsia and academia, I'm sure even at the university level, it's a smaller percentage. I doubt it's even a third that are really in that mindset of we're going to run this shit, but they're there. They're definitely there. And they're the ones who've been pushing out these publications, for the last 50, 60 years. They're the ones who write these papers. They're the ones who push out these agendas. The Ibram Kendis of the world, they're there, and they are well aware of the agenda they're pushing, of the results it will create, of the eggs they will need to break for their omelet, the gulags they'll need to open. They are well aware of the path they're heading down. And because they believe that they will be in charge when it all collapses, which, again, these people don't know history. If you look at history, they will be the first ones that are eradicated because they know the plan. They know how
the joke's
it's
on
unfolding. Them. Yeah, exactly. They'll be the first.
The joke's on them. Yeah. They're useful idiots, even though they're well educated. And most of the time, it's because they're tenured, right? They've got that sweet tenure, and a lot of universities they have to publish every so often, and critical race theory sounds good, so I'll write a paper on that. It'll get me all the applause of all the intelligentsia, and hey, look at that. I think a lot of it, I agree with you, man. I think a lot of it is people just towing that line because it sounds good. And there are people who genuinely think, though, that when the dust settles, they're going to be in charge. And it's funny that they're parroting something that the people who are actually going to probably be in charge when the dust settles, they're simply parroting that and hoping to God that, well, maybe I'll have a harem in, a compound somewhere. Who knows?
Right. And some of them already do. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, look at the leaders of Black Lives Matter. She's got 4 houses, and like that's ridiculous. You're a communist? You're a communist with 4 houses. But the funny thing is, and here's my belief, because I don't even think Marx was malintent. I think he really believed his shit. I think he really believed he could, create a utopia on Earth. I don't believe that most of these people had ill intent. I think early on, somebody identified elements within Marx's theory that would inevitably lead to tyranny. They just spotted. They're like, oh, this can only end one way. This is a formula for tyranny. And it's perfect because you're selling a dream. It's like, oh, utopia. Everyone wants utopia. So everyone buys in, but it cannot not lead to tyranny because there is no more freedom of your labor. That's why it's an anti-capitalist movement. What is the identifying factor of capitalism? And it's our personal power with our labor, that we choose to give our labor and to exchange our labor. And we choose what we exchange it for, when we exchange it, like we have that power. And in their utopia, you don't have that. You don't have that freedom. You don't have that power. And that's why it naturally must, like step one is tyranny. You got to have it because you got to force people to work. Like, look, we need people over here doing this, so you go over there and do that. We need people over here doing this, so you go over there and do that. So it's somebody just, I think, identified, and I don't think it was, and it, I don't know for certain. I just don't think necessarily Marx was like, let me, underhandedly pass off this, this theory that will lead to tyranny. I think he probably really believed that his stuff would lead to a utopia, because he didn't even, like, when he wrote his theories, he wasn't like, look, we need to force this on the people. He was like, he wrote his theories from a place of like, this is where we're going. This is like the natural progression of humanity. He really believed that like we would evolve into this. So from his point of view, you didn't need to force anything. It would just, this is how things are going to unfold. It was like he was prognosticating, like, okay, looking at, he had his science, which is, wasn't science, it was, his interpretation of Hegel applied to his theories of economics and history. And he just believed that this was a natural progression for humanity, that humanity will naturally lead itself into this utopia, right? And of course, his biases came in where he identifies like where the conflict is. And that's why we have a neo-Marxism, is because it evolved out of that, right? Because nowadays they're not selling the proletariat bourgeoisie conflict, although they are at some level. They've created 30 other conflicts to be in there as well. Like, of course, they've got the class, right? They've got, which is the bourgeoisie and proletariat conflict. They've got that as part of their new neo-Marxism, but they've thrown in identity politics and all these other things. So they've created a multitude of conflicts from which to act on, and so it's this multitude of conflicts that they feel can, bring about their utopia. And again, maybe even these Marxists in the universities, they may all believe it too. They may actually believe that there can be a utopia. Now, I don't believe they're so ignorant to think that it doesn't have to go to totalitarianism first, but they may genuinely believe that that's a temporary thing, because that's kind of how it's marketed. Like, hey, you got to bring the state in. But in Marx's theory, the state is just to like kind of set everything up, like, to set up all the collective systems and to redistribute all the assets and property and all that. But the natural progression would be that it would just become unneeded, right? We would get to the point where we would no longer even need a state. And then it would just be this collectivist utopia. And again, a lot of these professors may actually believe that. I don't believe that they're so ignorant that to know that you have to go through that element of tyranny first. So, but I believe that there's forces much bigger than academia pushing this, and I think that they get that. They know for certain that element of tyranny is there, and they're banking on it. They're counting on it, because for them, that's the final step, is the tyranny. They know there's not going to be some collectivist utopia, because they know they will be in charge. And all the useful idiots who think they're going to be in charge, they'll get rid of right away. And then, then we'll be on the list of who's next, because we speak against it. And we stand against it. And I know there's no freaking way they're going to get me to give them my labor for free, or to not have power with my choice of what I give my intention, my labor, my thought, my ingenuity. Like, I value that within me. I value myself as an individual. So I will never buy into that. So I would be, next on the list. You guys, being part of this conversation, you'd be on the next list. But we wouldn't even be the first ones. It would be the Ibram Kendis and those fools, because they got what they needed, which was the state, right? And those people are now, because they know what they did to get it there. They know the mechanics that were implemented to create the tyranny, they need to be the first ones done away with, which again is comedy. It's pure comedy that all these people who are pushing it aren't going to be the ones who run it.
Right.
But they think
as if the concepts themselves weren't funny enough.
Right. Well, anything else on this one? You guys feel like we beat this one to death, or any other insights?
The third element of your distinction.
Okay, so number one, selling the dream. Number two, problematizing, creating the victims and the victimizers, and creating a perpetual conflict. And number three is no solution, no remedy, no actual identifiable element to change or to improve or to replace that which you're tearing apart. So you could, not only is it no solution, but it's tearing down and no replacement, a tearing down and no solution.
I gotta write that down.
Right. It's does this make me look fat? But as a social concept, there's no winner. Right. There's no right answer.
Right. Exactly. Right. And it's such
awesome.
It's such an interesting. And again, I'm very familiar with these linguistic games because I've seen it in so many different domains, especially in like the personal development movements. Where they play these very similar linguistic games where everything can be turned around on someone. And it's a game of manipulation, where, you're attempting to get someone to do something you want them to do. So you use language to manipulate them. And if they rebut or don't see the wisdom of your statements so that they're not acting in the way you want them to act, then you start to turn things around on them and you start to use more language against them. And it's meant to incite like a sense of a conflict within their authenticity, a conflict within their sense of self, a conflict within their sense of virtue, right? And so that people use language to manipulate in that way where I twist and I turn until you feel sufficiently shamed into acting the way that I want you to act. And I mean, I've seen this play out in relationships.
Perfect example. I was staffing a leadership workshop in Durango, and I got on the first check-in call as staff, and everybody was late. Everybody but me. And they all got on, and then the person who set up the call and the whole thing finally got on. They're like, all right, everybody, let's go ahead and go around the circle and clean up our broken commitment of being on time. And I'm sitting there like, I don't have shit to clean up. I'm the only one here on time. I was like a busy signal until someone started the call. And so everybody's like, someone jumped on and said, well, actually, I'd like the organizer to clean up their mess first. And it ended up in this huge argument of who was going to clean up their mess first. And then at the end of it, they're like, all right, so who's committed to the workshop? And I was like, everybody, I apologize for my back and forth, but I am not committed to doing this workshop. Like, if that's the way we're starting it out, I'm bailing, I'm jumping ship. And of course, being in that space with a bunch of coaches, all of them went into coach mode. They're like, well, Gingy, you're out of integrity right now. And I'm like, okay, yeah, and? Like, well, you have to stay in integrity. I was like, are you in integrity? Do you have a problem with integrity? What kind of issues what stories are you making up about my integrity? Like, I quickly found myself in a battle of linguistic fuckery.
Yeah,
it was just
and that's
everybody firing shots back to try to manipulate, and I'm just like ching, 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 shielding myself from all of it. And it was hilarious, but I've never seen such a clear example. Like, nobody there was trying to empower me. Nobody there was trying to coach me through what was coming up for me. It was just like, well, you're out of integrity, and so you should do this thing we all want you to do because integrity is good.
right.
Integrity. Anyway.
Integrity farms. It's funny because I've had lots of experience with people like that, and typically my response to them is like, "Look, your Jedi mind tricks don't work on me." And I just drop it. Like, look, I'm not even going to play this game with you because I know what you're doing. Like, you cannot manipulate me with your language. So that's been my go-to, and you typically I laugh. I'm like, your Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. So,
well, the funny thing is that if you, like me playing ball with them, ran it full circle and brought it back to them, they had no idea where to go with it, except for, oh, you're just being a smart rat. Okay.
Exactly, because the game will just go on. It just goes in circles. Because I played the game. I played the linguistic fuckery game, and if you've got two skilled people in linguistic fuckery, it will just perpetually go in a circle because you're just constantly shifting the language to make the other the offender, make yourself the victim, right? It's just this. Oh, what was that phrase?
Darvo. Defend.
Argue.
Argue.
Defend, attack. No, it's defend, attack.
Yeah, that's right. And then reverse victim and opposer.
Offender. Victim and offender.
Victim and offender.
Yeah.
DARVO, the acronym. Defend, attack, and reverse the victim and oppressor.
Victim and offender. Yeah, oppressor, offender, whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly what was going on. And funny enough, that's the shit I pulled on those coaches.
Exactly. And that's why I said
my integrity. I was like, well, are you attached to my integrity? Are you an integrity? How am I a reflection of yourself? And boom, they break down like, I guess I'm out of integrity. I wasn't here on time, and I'm arguing, and oh my God, my relationships. And they go lose their shit because of course they're not an integrity. It's bottom line. I showed up.
This sounds like Landmark.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it pretty much is.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Like, they all do the same thing. That's why when I told Gingy when we started this, I'm like, look, we're an antithesis to all those personal development groups out there. Because that's what people don't realize is Landmark and LifeSpring and all those personal development companies. What's the one in Canada? The potential, whatever.
They're human all potential movement or something.
No, it's I forget what it is. It's I forget.
There is one called the Human Potential Movement.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. They're all over the world. But here's the thing: they're all pushing postmodernist concepts. They are the reason this whole critical theory, neo-Marxist movement is taking off like wildfire, is because everyone who's bought into that bullshit buys into the critical theories, buys into the postmodernism, so that's why I told you when we started this, I'm like, look, we're an antithesis to that, because I knew you had been exposed to it. I know I've seen it, and experienced it. So I was like, okay, clearly, because I saw a lot of those people being the first ones to jump on board with the critical theories. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, knowing it's been in academia since the 60s, but realizing that it had spread far beyond academia, that it had made its way into popular culture. It had made its way into, what we call personal development trainings. A lot of these personal development writers, right? They're pushing these theories. They're pushing these principles, this absolute relativism, and again, I'm not I'm not saying all, not all authors, like I find tremendous value in some of Don Miguel Ruiz's works. But there is this element, and it's everywhere. So if you've been a part of any kind of if you've read any kind of self-help book, you know what I mean? Like, it's everywhere. They've been pushing these principles everywhere.
Well, the shit of it is that at the core of it, there is some really powerful, amazing personal growth tools stuff that's there in the middle of it. So, like, stuff that I was exposed to.
But there's contradictions. Yeah. Yeah, but I changed it. Like, that's why I started my workshops, was because I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not pushing this postmodernist bullshit. Like, there's no fucking way. So I changed it. I'm like, look, there are some powerful principles and some powerful concepts that you can use to give people as tools to, to have some kind of power and authoring in their life. But at the same time, I recognized these elements that they've sprinkled in that are a complete contradiction to, like, if you really want to empower people, because I'm also I believe in individualism. I don't believe everyone should be identified through a group, so I very much am a proponent of individualism, of freedom, of liberty. Like, those are all, for me, sacred, so I just kind of saw the writing on the wall, and then I started recognizing it in a lot of the self-help books and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh my God, like, this is everywhere. Like, it is everywhere. But at the time, I didn't see it as a threat. I saw it as like a nuisance, but it wasn't
like a misunderstanding or something.
Yeah. Because even up until 2015, when I had a girl tell me to use Zim or Zur, and I laughed at her, I'm like, look, I go, this person wants to be treated like everyone else, right? Then they don't get their own special pronoun. I go, pick one. They can be a him, they can be a her, because I didn't even know. I couldn't tell, because it was actually a youth training, it was teenagers. So I couldn't even tell whether it was a boy or a girl. You know what I mean?
This kid was in puberty, and like, it's hard to tell with some kids in puberty. They're still working things out.
Yeah, exactly. So I couldn't tell. So I'm like, oh, all right, have her pick one. But I am not going to use Zim or Zur. And to me, again, I didn't see it because I was like, I thought this was an anomaly. I thought this girl was just
That was the first time, dude. That was the
that was the first time I'd ever seen it. The first time I'd ever heard it. I thought it was just some random piece of ridiculousness. And then by 2018, holy crap, it's everywhere.
3 years. It was crazy. Yeah. But like I was saying, the shit of it is that there's really some empowering things embedded in it. And so when I started getting involved in other centers and working with people individually and getting to know people, like there's a big group here in Austin that, like, because Landmark is here, that they all had gone through Landmark. And if you know anything about that, it's different. They don't have the in-person workshops where you go through all the exercises and stuff. It's basically like sit down and learn this information. So it's all mental. And it's not experiential.
Yeah, no, it's the didactic method is what it's. Yeah. That's the methodology used.
And so like all of these people here,
it's like a lecture series.
Yeah. And so all these people here, they're like, they get it, they understand it, they know the words, they know the terminology, but they don't have like an experience of it or an embodiment of it or like an intuitive understanding of it. And so I'm like, well, let's practice this. And I had to explain to people what holding space is and what that means. And, simple stuff like that, or like the reason behind distinctions. Like everyone's like, oh, no, you're not supposed to say I have to. You have to say I get to, because that's like empowering and stuff. And I'm like, you guys don't get it. The whole distinction is meant to show you whether you're coming from obligation or not. And if you're coming from obligation, you can shift out of it. Because obligation is not as fun and cool as not being an obligation. And so, like, it's just a choice. It's like there's nothing to do unless you want to, and here's the tools to navigate the situation. And they all took it as like this how to live your life manual. Like if I want to be an effective entrepreneur, if I want to be an effective teacher or politician or family member, these are the things that I embody. And these are the things that I do more like it in order to be successful.
If I want to be successful, I have to say I get to.
That's pretty much what they were saying. Or like someone would come to me and be like, Gingy, you get to be on time. And I'm like, motherfucker, your get to sounds a lot like a have to.
My kids get to take out the trash. My daughter got to mow the lawn today. It's pretty great.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's all awesome. If you're using those things to empower yourself, to shift your experience of your reality, all that stuff is great.
Mindset. Yeah, it's about a mindset.
If you're using it to manipulate, as soon as you start to use it to manipulate, or it's all just mental and you understand it, but you don't really get it, that's when shit starts to not work, starts to fall apart a little bit and gets dangerous. Like people coming up to you using this language, it can be incredibly manipulative because it inspires introspection.
Well, and the thing is also people, and again, I don't think it's not malicious for most people, because it's a way that we've learned to make it in the world. It's a way that we cope with the world around us is manipulation, right? Now, for most of us, it's very subtle and it's not obtrusive and it's not, it's little things, you know what I mean? Little, really innocent even, you can say in some ways. I don't mean manipulation to be something disparaging or something negative, because even a woman who puts makeup on is manipulating. Look, that's not you. You don't really look like that. So in reality, there's a level of manipulation there. Now, is it bad? No, because in reality, it's playing on our biological urges, because it's like in some way stimulating within us the sense of fertility, which we aren't necessarily like, that's not something we're consciously like, if you're out in public and you see a pretty girl, you're not thinking, ooh, she looks fertile. You know what I mean? Like it's not a conscious thought you have, but at a biological
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, Nick's all about the fertile.
But on a biological level, you're drawn to fertility. So big, plump, luscious lips, a flush face, a big butt, big boobs. Like these are indicators at a biological level of fertility. So it's, now if she's, got, what do they call those, Spanx? Okay, so she may be artificially patting her butt, artificially patting her boobs. She's got makeup on, so her face isn't really flush. Her lips aren't really, I don't even know the word for it, but whatever you're trying to make your lips look like. But it's triggering within us. So it's on some level. Well, if she's doing all those things on a pretty big level, that's manipulation, right? So it's not that manipulation is bad. So people also learn to manipulate through language, right? Because there's a specific person I like to use in examples a lot, and I don't think she maliciously even intends to manipulate, but it's how she's lived her entire life, right? So she's constantly using this language to manipulate. And I don't think it's on a conscious level. I think it's just become a system for her, to manipulate with this, like you were just talking about the get to, right? Yeah. That would be something she would do. She'd be like, oh, well, you get to do that. Like trying to get you to do something. What do you mean I get to? And I remember one time she used on me, well, I was trying to create a win-win. How the fuck is this a win-win? Win-win-win for you. I don't win in this scenario at all.
Win-win means I win twice.
Yeah. But she just again, she didn't think about the things she said. I think it was just it was an automatic reaction for her. It's just jargon. It's just lingo. It's linguistic fuckery. You know what I mean? She just spits out these words because typically the people she spits them out to don't think, don't feel comfortable being authentic, so they react to these words in a way of like wanting to be liked, wanting to be right, wanting to look good, right? And or wanting to live up to some image that they've curated for themselves. So they react accordingly. So to someone else, that Jedi mind trick works. Oh, I was trying to create a win-win. Oh, okay, yeah, great, win-win. And they just mindlessly go along with it. I
didn't even think about how I get to win.
Exactly.
Well, like,
they just
I'm thinking
win,
back
and
to
they're
my
like, oh, I must win.
I'm thinking back to my shootout with all those coaches. And when I look at your 3 elements, I'm like, okay, as soon as I said I was out, somebody jumped in and questioned my own integrity. So really what they were doing was selling me a dream of what it would be like if Gingy had perfect integrity. I'm starting to think now, if I was perfect integrity, not only would I stay in this workshop, but I would also get all the other things in my life that I would want. My mind actually went there. Like of no intentional choice. That's where it went to. And I was like, wait a minute. And back then, it's like creating and identifying the enemies and the obstacles and what's in the way of the dream. I was like, oh, it's just my own integrity and saying no to this. And I should say yes to this and stay here. And really, there was no value in me staying there to do any of that at all. So like the having no solution or anything else, well, I guess that doesn't really fit in too much with that, because realistically, all she wanted was to manipulate. So it's like using the first 2 things in a way to manipulate somebody into doing whatever the thing is. And that's the goal. That's the solution. Here, we want you to stay. Imagine what your life would be like if you were in integrity. And I know this is something that you've heard before, and this is in the way of you is by quitting this. You're not going to be in integrity, and we don't want that. And so stay, and then everything will be solved. So really, there's no solution to my overall integrity. Just stay in this workshop because I want you to.
Yeah, and then integrity will work itself out. Yep. Kind of like utopia will just work itself out.
Yeah, rather than saying, well, my integrity is I don't want to deal with this group, so I'm out. That's my integrity.
Exactly. And if you were to say that, then the comeback, again, you could go in circles with this. And I've seen, especially people who call themselves life coaches and shit like that, because they've been fully indoctrinated by this jargon, by this lingo, by these concepts, and they can twist anything and everything in circles perpetually. They can just go on and on and on and on, because in that moment you could very well say, well, yeah, I am being in integrity. I was the only one here on this call on time. None of you were. So I'm maintaining my integrity in choosing out of this group because y'all ain't in integrity. Very easily turn that around on them,
As the only person that was in integrity with showing up on time, I'm also going to maintain that integrity by not putting myself in a space of unintegrity people.
And again, do you see the correlations here with the critical theorist approach?
Exactly.
You create that superiority, right? Like this is like the identity politics kind of twist, right? In that those with certain identities, opinions are more valuable, right? That's one of the kind of the tenets of identity politics. So,
like the coaches.
So I identify as the only one in integrity because I was here on time. And so if I identify as the only one in integrity, well, then my opinion on integrity is the only one that counts. You see?
Exactly.
Brandon, that's integritist, and you're violating my safe space.
It's totally integritist. Well, now I'm an anti-integritist.
There you go.
But gosh, it's so funny because this is actually what's funny is Gingy and I, when we decided to do this particular topic, this is where our conversation started. Was in like the linguistic fuckery of personal development programs. It wasn't. Were we talking about the other one? The Kung Fu one?
We were talking about that workout group, that workout cult that I got involved with last year. Because they, I mean, that really touches more in with like the cult of wokeness. But we were talking about before the call that when I was involved with that group, it was like, come on in. The pie in the sky is that you'll be flexible, you'll be strong, you'll be fit. You'll also be able to be more successful in all areas of your life because you've got a group of people to support you, and you'll get to learn so much from this like guru master dude, and just like amazing. It looked like, you know, the best place I could put myself in if I really truly wanted to take myself on and grow. And so I got involved, got in the group. They were like, share some stuff about you, tell us what you're doing throughout your day. The more you share, the more that we can help you. And every time I posted something, every time I communicated into the group, somebody would just start firing off like ungrounded assessments, basically. Like, all right, guys, so like today I'm working on this. I'm just not sure if I really want to go full time with this thing or maybe part time. They're like, well, Gingy, that's because you don't listen. Well, what do you mean? Well, you don't listen because I know that I don't listen, so that means that you don't listen. And that's why you can't decide on these things. I'm like, wait a minute. I get that I'm here to work on myself, so there must be something I'm missing. And my mind goes down that track of like, what am I not seeing here? But in hindsight, looking at every time I communicated, looking at all of those little posts and those interactions, all it was talking shit, tearing down, and getting to a point where like, basically we're gonna build you back up. Now that you don't have an idea of who you are, what you stand for, or anything else, now that you've been severely beaten up and pulverized up, then, well, okay, sorry. What I meant to say was that basically there was no way forward. There was just wrong turn, smart rat, or any other type of linguistic fuckery that ended up having like, these are all the problems that are standing in your way. Every single thing that you keep bringing into the group is in your way. And I said, okay, well, how do I move forward? And they would quote a song, or they would give me some vague analogy or something like that. Like one time I was like, guys, I've been waking up every day for a month at sunrise to do this meditation, and I'm just not sure how long I want to keep on doing this morning sunrise thing. The guy was like, oh, classic over under. I'm like, oh, lingo, cool. What does that mean? What is an over under? And the response I got, the definition was, it's like that Michael Jackson song. You're too high to get over, yeah, yeah. Too low to get under, yeah, yeah. What the fuck? What does that have to do? Yeah, I was like, what does that have to do with my morning meditations? I'm like, I'm too high to get over, too low to get under. I'm stuck in the middle, yeah, yeah. But are you saying I should maybe meditate 6 days a week? Am I going too hard right now? Am I not going hard enough? And so there was no, like, here's the way forward. Just like, oh, dude, you're stuck in the middle. That's what it is. Or the one thing I got a lot was, you're in your head. Like I should go somewhere else besides being in my head. And I'm like, okay, where else do I go? Well, not in your head. Okay, where's that? And the irony of it is that idea is coming right from their head. So all this to say that the whole time I was in there, the whole game was just, everything was the obstacle. Everything was defined as whatever's in my way of my goals. Even not knowing what my goal was, or not, knowing what my goal was, because those both happened in there. Both of knowing and not knowing the goals were getting in my way. And at some point I was just like, well, I'm just here to get beat the hell up and told that I'm wrong and that I'm always in my way, until what? And they were like, well, at some point you're going to have some big emotional breakdown. Everybody has it in their first year. And then the team helps build you back up. I was like, you literally want to tear me down and rebuild me the way that you want me to be. And then that happened to everybody else. Because I've been keeping tabs with one person in that group. And that's the game. And that happens over and over and over and over. And it is absolutely a form of manipulation. There's no doubt about
it. It's right out of Mao. That's the struggle session that they did in communist China. That is how again, that's your first step before you go to the gulag. First you have a struggle session. And if you properly break down the way they want you to break down, and then you build up the way they want you to build up, right? The re-education takes, then you can become a member of the collective. Otherwise, off to the gulag with you. And you see it, and I don't know if it's Mao's invention, because there's something very similar in 1984, where Winston is, the big brother wants him to admit that 2 + 2 is 5, and he's fighting against it because he's like, look, you've taken everything from me. You've taken my family, you've taken my my possessions, you've taken everything away from me. The one thing I have is my freedom to recognize that 2 + 2 is 4. And so they proceed to torture him for hours, days on end, and finally, he admits, okay, 2 + 2 is 5. And they're like, no, like, you're just saying that. And their point was, like, in order to be accepted back in to the in group, you must believe that 2 + 2 is 5. It's not enough to just say 2 + 2 is 5. You must believe 2 + 2 is 5. And that's Orwell, and I believe that predates Mao, but it's the same thing. Mao had these struggle sessions, and again, it's almost like a signature element of especially of the in-person personal development trainings and things is the breakdown and build up.
Breakdown, breakthrough. I tell you, dude, the thing, it took absolutely everything that I had in myself to quit that group. And there were times that I would quit and they would, oh yeah, but like if you are really going to quit, I'm like, dude, I already quit. Like, I'm not even screwed. Well, like, I had quit, I had left the group, I had gotten my money back, and they're still having a conversation with me. They're like, I know, but like, if you really decide to quit the group, I'm like, what else do I need to do to believe that I'm out and that I'm not here anymore? And it didn't just take like, okay, I've got my courage up, let's do this, I'm just going to go break this off and I have to deal with this conversation and then I'm scotch-free. No, there has been a lingering effect and like a repetition. And I don't talk about this too often, but I am sensitive enough to know when people are thinking about me, and not like, oh man, I wish Gingy was here, and then moving on. But if I'm like the subject of a conversation, I notice it and I feel it. And that has happened over and over and over the past year since I left this group. And I've checked in, I've been like, so what are they saying about me now with this other person? And I don't usually go there, but basically what I'm saying is that the hardest part of that entire process was to get clear with myself on why I was there and what I wanted. And what I was there for didn't exist within that group. And so I was clear I was going to leave. And so I was open to being wrong and had some conversations, but then still left, and then got attacked from left and right, and then disowned and ignored and abandoned by every single other person in that group, with the exception of one. And even like what 6, 7, 8, 9 months later, something like that, I had a reconnection call with one of them, and they literally had like a notepad sitting on their lap out of the camera shot, and they were taking notes, checking in with me, like, well, have you actually, achieved
Jesus
this one
Christ.
goal that you set, and have you? And I was like, dude, you're taking notes on our phone call. This isn't even a connection call. And so I had to sit back and redirect the conversation back to him over and over.
Well, do you realize what's happening there, right?
What do you mean?
They're justifying their commitment to this group. They're justifying their allegiance, their dogma. You know what I mean? It's
I become the example.
Yeah, exactly. If I well, look, if he can report back that, oh, well, Gingy quit the group and he hasn't achieved all these things we thought he should achieve,
or he's still doing the same shit, ruining his life, doing nothing, and we've all grown so much.
Yeah, it's
and they were doing that while I was in there. They were doing that while I was in there too. It'd be like, well, Gingy, if you look over here at these people, they're doing really, really good. And I'm like, well, why? Because all it looks like they're doing, from my point of view, is just the same shit I'm doing, but agreeing with you.
Right.
We're all sharing about ourselves, and they're asking questions, and I'm asking questions, but then I'm saying, well, how does that work with this thing over here?
Right. You had the gall to question the dogma.
It's like everybody was talking about communication is like our number one thing. Communicate, communicate, communicate. But nobody listens. And I'm like, and then I got shit for not listening. I'm like, well, hold on. Like one of the members in the group got called out and belittled and criticized. She got put in the hot seat, is what they call it, because
that's what they call it.
They call it the hot seat.
They've got a hot seat.
And everybody gets a turn in the hot seat, dude. Everyone gets a turn in the hot seat. But she had her turn in the hot seat because she didn't remind everybody that it was her birthday, and nobody remembered her birthday, so she got called out for it.
Yeah, it's
classic. Blows my mind.
Was this the gem of Scientology? What?
Yeah. What kind of workout group was this?
Well, it was all awesome until I joined the national part of it, which was basically a Facebook group where everyone communicates together. And the workouts, the actual physical exercise bit of it is pretty awesome. It's one of the most like powerful, strengthening mobility type of things that I've ever experienced. But the mental and emotional and spiritual side of it was the exact opposite. It was the most disempowering and belittling experience of my life. And I've been through some shit. And that was by far the worst of it. And I was only in there for a month. But yeah, it was I watched the Scientology documentary on Netflix 6 months ago, so like halfway through after leaving this group, and my mind was just exploding. I was like, oh my God, they do the exact same things. And I called Brandon and I was like, dude, I can't believe this. I've been watching, this thing, and this is exactly what happened in this group. And holy shit, we have to have a call about cults. So we have a whole episode on like global tribalism is what we call it. Everyone's need to get into a group and to be part of this group and basically be in this abusive relationship.
Yeah, actually, remember that's the one that didn't get recorded because we tried to do it as a podcast and a Telegram call, and
that's right.
We had some serious technical difficulties, so we just ended up just switching over to the Telegram call, and none of it got recorded.
That's right.
You guys must have angered Xenu or something, because
yeah, we did.
If you guys need a hand on that, I grew up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, so I'm really sensitive to this stuff. And they had Leah Remini's Scientology show. She actually had an episode on Jehovah's Witnesses. But yeah, if you guys want to re-record that, let me know. I'd love to tune in.
Let's do it, man. You want to be our guest on it?
Yeah, I think I feel like it's really kind of part and parcel of every call we do because there's like an overarching common thread to a lot of what we talk about, comes back to wokeness. And it's, we did record the cult of wokeness, which there's such a religious element to all of it. It's because it's so much of it is faith based. The only thing they're missing is a deity, because they've even got their prophets, like the Ibram Kendis, that they've got their prophets. They lack a deity, but it is religious clearly, because so much of it is taken on faith. Like, find me a coherent argument for the abolishment of police, and it's all purely based in faith, that if we just get rid of them all, everything's going to be awesome. Okay, we're just going to take your word for that, right? We're just going to trust you on this. So it's very much faith based, so it's very religious in that sense, and there's dogma, that definitely goes along with it. So it's just they're just lacking a deity, which is funny because it's diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Which is DI, which is Latin for God. So their deity, I guess, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. But there's such a cultish aspect to it all, and I think in that conversation we kind of. And again, we could definitely do another call on it, because our come from on it was to identify what makes a cult, right? We did that, and we kind of went through Scientology and really anything and everything, and we pulled apart, what's ideology, what's dogma, what's faith. I don't know if you got a chance to read that conversation in the group that we did, how, not on a voice call, but on the actual, messaging on our group, Gingy. We just did what do you call it? A conversation on faith. And it wasn't just faith. It was some distinctions that we drew, because it's actually a pretty long conversation between me, Matt, and Todd. And we go.
I did see some of that. Yeah, I didn't watch I didn't read all of it, but I got a lot of it.
Yeah, because I mean, to me, that's a very important distinction, because I feel that faith is such a significant element, regardless of whether you are religious or what your religion is. Without an element of faith, the social structures, your personal life, everything kind of breaks down, because without faith, there is no intrinsic value in life. There is no purpose, there is no meaning. And it's funny because Matt always wants to put himself in the position of, what's he call himself? An existential nihilist or something. Yeah. And, which he isn't, you know what I mean? He's really not. I get that that's how he identifies. That's his identity. But Todd was just kind of at first it was a conversation between Todd and Matt. And then I jumped in, and then it was between me and Matt. And then Todd just kind of was throwing in here and there. And Todd, because me and Matt were going in one direction, and then Todd kind of brought in this, it boils down to a conversation on morality, and he brought in this element of faith in love, right? And he just kind of threw that out there as a phrase, as this is the basis of all morality. And he kept coming from this position that philosophy is useless, and I'm like, if you want to have a conversation about faith and love, the only way you can have any kind of a meaningful conversation and create any kind of value is through philosophy. And I broke down like, look, you can't, like, I get that there are philosophies, right? Like people call, like there is existentialism and is a philosophy, but philosophy is a method, just like science is a method. And if you want to have a meaningful conversation about anything, whether it's objective or subjective, it's philosophical. And you can't just throw a phrase out there like faith and love and say, oh, that's the basis of morality. What the fuck does that mean? Like, for one, what do you mean by love? You know, like, yeah, we all have a sense of what love is. We all have an experiential aspect of love that we've had, but you can't just throw that phrase out there like it has some significant meaning to everyone and that, oh, okay, yeah, that's all you had to say. Now we can all get along. Like, no, that doesn't work. And so it's funny because I put it out there. So like after I was done with Matt and our morality conversation, I kind of chimed in on Todd and I'm like, okay, let's have that conversation about like, can faith in love be a basis for a method of morality? And, you know, so I kind of broke down my position on it because again, I very much do believe that faith is an important and significant aspect and could serve as a basis for a method of morality. And and you know how Matt is. Matt chimes right in. So and then it turns into a conversation between me and Matt again on faith and love. But I kind of brought Matt from a place of being, because Matt was kind of in this mindset that the only thing valuable is objective. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of his. Because in my response to Todd, I was like, look, there is nothing objective about faith or love. But to presume that you can only have, you know, that only objective things are provable or that philosophy can only deal with objective things, that's just a misunderstanding of philosophy. Like there's a huge part of philosophy and the method of philosophy that is subjective. In fact, it's the only way to deal with the subjective is through philosophy. Like you want to have a conversation about consciousness, science hits the wall. You know what I mean? See, you can't really have very much of a conversation about consciousness in science. You know, you could go into some quantum aspects and but you hit the wall very quickly and you don't really come to any kind of conclusions or anything. It's even hard to form theories out of it. With the scientific method, but with philosophy, you could take that conversation on consciousness much further. But then finally at the end, like me and Matt, actually, I feel like that conversation like went somewhere. For me, it was very valuable to explain from a place of what to me what faith is, how it is, why it's significant, how it is applied, what it creates or what it can create for the individual and for a community. And so for me, it was a powerful conversation, and probably it was significantly powerful because it was with Matt, because he always approaches everything as devil's advocate, as the cynic. He's definitely a great discussion partner when you're seeking to like really flesh something out, you know, to like let me really understand what I think, you know, and so he's a great kind of board to bounce things off of, because he's going to twist and turn and, you know, question everything. My philosophy of faith. So faith is an unyielding trust in or of something that does not require an authoritative source or a particular outcome. To distinguish from belief, in many religious philosophies, faith, which is belief without evidence, implies or overtly connects the belief to an authoritative source and a prescribed outcome, i.e., live a righteous life and spend the rest of eternity in heaven because God and his vicars say so. My faith in living my life by my principles has no authority to dictate these principles, and no guarantee of an outcome for living by my principles. Needing the guaranteed outcome or believing in the guaranteed outcome is also a lack of faith. At that point, your choice of principles you live by is either driven by fear of a consequence or the promise of a reward, a lack of faith. My faith's unyielding nature does not mean that the principles are statutory. They can be fluid and dynamic based on my experience and wisdom. If a principle I had faith in begins to hurt myself or others, I may let it go, and my faith may shift to new principles. This is the gist of my philosophy of faith. I'm open to critiques and discussion. So that's like the tail end of the conversation. Like I said, it doesn't really go into our morality, which I think would be a great conversation as well, because and it's actually it's definitely a good fit, the faith and morality, because that's another thing that's threatening our culture right now, and why the left have adopted this, oh, we're for science, even though they're clearly not for science. They take the most unscientific approach to everything, but they claim to be for science, and this is the reason, because it's the dichotomy of science and religion. They're against religion because of the morals and ethics. So in order to destroy a culture, you must destroy the underlying values, right? The morals of that society. And so it's an attack on religion. That's why they claim to be for science, because they look at
that's why they use
dichotomy.
That's why they use the phrase, I believe in science.
Yes,
not
exactly.
Like science exists, but I always wondered about that. Like the belief in science, I'm like, you guys are just trying to make it into a religion. Boom.
Right.
And I've even said for years that science operates more like a religion. People are like, Newton's third law is immutable. I'm believing that, and it's infallible, and it's like a blind faith in a working theory, basically. And there was no room for, growth or expansion or more possibilities. And now we're actually seeing it, stuck in people's grass.
Yeah. And again, and that's actually a relatively modern way of even approaching science, because a lot of these, we call them the forefathers of our modern scientific methods and scientific law, most of these guys were men of faith. Like even Galileo. Galileo was a man of faith. Sir Francis Bacon was a man of faith.
Isaac Newton
was a man of faith. These were religious people. They were men of faith. And so it's interesting to me that now it's an either or.